Welcome to the video. How do you encourage and support people to choose deeper bravery and authenticity? So in this video, I'm going to review some ways that you can create the container in Act 1, that first part of a workshop, as well as how you can show up throughout the training to increase the chances that people will choose bravery, engage in more authentic, more vulnerable ways. Now, the best place to start doing this is in your welcome and your intro. Talk about what you used to be like, what happened, so how did you learn and grow, and what you're like now. That's from 12-step work, speaking from the podium. What I was like, what happened, what I'm like now. So some stories as you introduce yourself, maybe a couple missteps and what you're learning so that you don't do them in the future. You want to show how you're still on the learning curve and particularly be talking from different privileged identities. And the more recent a situation was a misstep, the better. Or ones that your gut just says, oh, I don't want to share these. Those are probably the ones you need to be sharing. You also want to acknowledge any supervisory relationships in the room. You'll ask about this as you're doing your needs assessment. But even if you did, different people may have showed up. And so you just want to ask, so who's some supervisory relationships in the room? Who has someone either you report to or second level or third or fourth level up, and just see how many people raise their hands. I ask how many supervisors there are, just so that we just kind of breathe into that. And I do several things. One is that I talk to the supervisors and leaders directly, and I say, I expect you to actively participate and be modeling the authenticity, the bravery, the skill practice that might be new for you in the same way that you would expect people in the area that you work with to model. But they're going to have to see you taking risks, showing up before they may trust that they can do it in front of you. And then I'll recommend, and I'll say something like, if you haven't yet negotiated explicitly a relationship with the people that you supervise or that you have as a supervisor or second, third level up, if you haven't negotiated confidentiality and the space and the grace to be fully present, to do our own personal work, to maybe misstep, make mistakes, knowing that we're all here learning. So if you haven't done that yet, I would do it at the break. But until then, or until you do that, then I would choose to be with a partner or in a small group that's outside of the reporting relationship, so that you're not putting anybody in a position to have to wonder if they can say what they want to say until you've negotiated confidentiality. Now, we'll do that as a large group, but I want you to do it within the relationship. And then I'm keeping an eye on whoever raised their hand as leaders and supervisors. So if I don't hear them speaking by the break, I might go up and have a chat with them and nudge them a bit more, because people are watching them, and people will probably only go as far as they see people in higher leadership going. And then all the dyads that I recommend you do early is all about creating the container for bravery, trust, authenticity. So what's your passion for creating inclusive work environments, serving increasingly diverse customers? And a couple new ones I don't mention as often. You can ask people to and claim their salient identities, their group memberships that are most up for them in that moment, with a partner I enter feeling. And then again, debrief that large group, trying to get the feel for the group. It can also be a great in the moment, taking the pulse of the group just to see what kind of feelings people have. You can also get that by hopes and fears or hopes and concerns. Again, I like them in twos. You can move them to a new three, fours maybe, but if you get too big, then only one or two people may talk and not everybody may get a voice. And then you might just get a few louder voices in the debrief, as opposed to in a new pair, what are your hopes and fears, or with their high five buddy. So they're beginning to have more trust and bravery there. Another reason to do high five buddies, go greet people, find someone you don't know that your high five buddy. It just adds a little levity, little energy. What's up? What's your passion? Actually, you could do all of these with your high five buddy. And by the end, there might be more willingness to be honest and then say from your group, what did you all talk about? Or have it do in pairs and then find another group of pairs. What are your hopes and fears? And then from a group of four, if your gut is saying it just does not feel safe for folks to speak, that could be a way to get a few more voices connected. And then what were some themes as you talked? Now that sets up this continuum, which I use occasionally. If it's an intact group, I'll definitely do it. If they're asking for conflict mediation or navigating difficult situations, I'll do it. How willing are you to be authentic and brave in this session? And I let them reflect. 0, not at all. 10, completely. I make sure they know it's a continuum. And I'll often ask people to move to literally be on a continuum. Now, if that feels too risky, you can have them either speak or hold up fingers what their number is and have people pan and notice the patterns and call out the patterns. Then you can have them turn to a partner. So whether they move to the continuum or they're doing it at their seats, talk to a partner about what your number is and why. Do that a couple minutes, maybe hear some of that out. Because again, speaking truth to power, naming the concerns and fears is useful to you, it's useful to others, know they're not alone. And then people might say, yeah, I feel that too, but I'm also excited about. So you can get a nice variety if you let them have one-on-one time, individual reflection first, share, large group, and then you'll see what they're doing. And then that leads you right into, so what do you need to be a bit more brave, authentic, engaged today? And I phrase it as, on the scale of 0 to 10, what could we do so you might choose to move just a half step or maybe a full step closer to 10? Again, I'm not asking to leap 3, 4 more, just kind of a little bit. And that sets you up for learning guidelines. Now, the pace of this may feel slower than you like, and yet remember, you have to meet people where they are. And if they're coming in and you go in and you're greeting people and your gut is they're not looking me in the eye, they're sitting with people they work with, no one's sitting near the front. As I go greet people, I get a cold shoulder. Again, it's not about you. You're probably picking up how willing are they to even be there. If it's a mandatory meeting, you have to do more of this warm up and creating bravery, authenticity. And as you do each one of these, you might get a sense, okay, they're warm enough, or you might get like, I need to do more. But always I encourage you to do learning guidelines, engagement guidelines, whatever you want to call them. And I usually do them in several steps, as you may have noticed in some other videos. I'll have them look at these, and then I'll have them ask the question and reflect individually of all of these, which ones have you intentionally negotiated, discussed, co-created, agreed to? I'll use a lot of words until they find one they like in your group, your team, a task force, an ongoing inclusion change team, whatever group they're in. It may just be 3 people they work with. And so I give them time to individually reflect, check off which, if any, because then I'll say, and if you're thinking I'm talking a language you don't understand, many organizations don't have this an explicit regular part, but I think it should be every 6 months at least to have people review some potential learning guidelines, discuss them, and explicitly agree to use them in meetings and as they engage one-on-one in formal conversations or even informally around the water coolers, those sorts of things. And then I'll say, and if you've not ever done that, so what norms and agreements do you use, even if not explicitly negotiated? And this worksheet can be a way for you to think about which ones, and I always have the slide up, and add any others. And then I like this last question that I've added in the last year or so. What could be different if everyone agreed and engaged in ways that these type of working agreements, learning guidelines, engagement guidelines in everything we do? What could be different if people agreed and engaged these ways? So I leave them alone for a little while, a couple minutes until people look like they're done. I wander around. And then we move into having the conversation. And I'll say, so which ones did you negotiate, agree to? I do that clap if. So I'll do, give me a single clap if in the last 6 months or a year, or I'll do 6 months, you have intentionally, your group has sat down, a list, something like this, you've negotiated and agreed to them, and then we'll see how many clap, but then the whole group gets to see if it's a pattern and if other people do it. And then if their group doesn't do it, they're like, maybe we should. And then I'll say, how about within the last year or 18 months? Then I might ask if there are a lot of leaders and supervisors in the room, how many of y'all are willing to move forward to do this? Usually there's a clap. I may not do that. If there aren't too many claps, I may wait for that question until after we've discussed them a bit. So then I might ask, so which ones of these do you really want in your work environment? Which ones do you have, even if you haven't negotiated them, and what's the impact? And so I'll listen to see how many that come up, how many people are joining in. Then I might say, which ones of these would you love in your work environment to increase productivity, innovation, teamwork, working relationships? And usually people will name most of them. And then I'll ask, How many of y'all are willing to go back and ask your supervisor if you could have some time to negotiate these? So I'll ask a question, empower people that are not the supervisors, at least in their direct team. So then I'll ask them to individually review them again for our session. Which ones will help you engage in authentic dialogue? And notice the last two. Which ones are easy for you in this group, meaning strength? You might even want to use that language. Which ones are strengths for you? You find you do pretty regularly. And are there one or two from my list that are a stretch for you? And then I'll just invite people to reflect on those and turn to somebody and have that conversation. And then we'll hear it out. So just 3 or 4 people. What are your strengths that you'll be willing to contribute in this moment in our workshop? And which are some that you're willing to stretch into, to practice here, so when you go back to your unit, your department, you're able to do them a bit more. And this is, raising the expectation for how we're going to engage each other. And you notice in the list, I'll go back one, bravery is in there. It's number 9. Take risks, lean into discomfort, be brave, engage. So I'll have that up on the screen, as then I'll emphasize some. And so I'll say, are there any of these you really want to emphasize in this room? So maybe you again can move +1, maybe just a half step. And I'm listening to make sure that number 10, confidentiality. And if they've been hesitant to be verbally engaged, and if only a handful of people, I might start with that. If they don't bring it up, I say, so what does confidentially mean to you? And how can we do that? How can we respect and maintain confidentiality today, as well as further after this, forever, until someone explicitly gives you permission to use their name and the story they said they told? And so people will share, I love the Vegas rule, what happens here stays here. And others will say, I want people to share the learning, but not the stories, not my name. And then I'll say, if you're willing to have people share your story, just tell us publicly. And a few people say, anything I say, small group, large group, you're willing to share, so long as it's for the further learning and help our whole organization get more equitable and inclusive. I don't ask for people to do that, but if they to share it on their own, then I'll take it. Other ones, I want to make sure that you underline. Number 4, listen respectfully and seek to understand. And the last part, most people love, listen harder if you disagree. And that sets up really exploring other people's perspectives. And so if people do take a risk, I want to make sure, number 7, we're open to new and different perspectives. We really chew on it, seek to understand. We're open and honest in our communications, and we're asking questions. So any of those can help create that container. Even if a group will name 6, 8, 10 of these, often number 12 is not named, unless it's a dynamic in the organization that needs even more work, or people are just scared to do it, so they don't name it. Recognize your triggers, hot buttons. And so I usually ask the group, so what is a hot button? How would you define triggers? And I'll see how much the group's willing to share, and then I'll give my definition of that unexpected wave of emotion, or maybe you thought you might feel triggered, but you're out of your body a bit, or it's a deeper emotional, more intense than you expected. You can't think as clearly. How many of y'all have done this in the last week? Out of that, how many of y'all have reacted in ways you later were like, I should not have done that? Again, I do that using some humor, or I'll tell a story if the group still hasn't warmed up as much as I want them to. And then we'll practice. How can you notice in your body? And so I'll have them take some deep breaths and notice their chest, their shoulders, their stomach. I'll notice their emotions. If I know the group might be a little stuck, I might have them do it when they first come in, and then notice what they're feeling after passion, so that they start beginning to pan themselves. And then number 9, if they haven't named, take risks, lean into discomfort, be brave, and go 1 plus your comfort zone. So that's number 2. Participate fully, +1. And again, I'll do a plus 0.5 if that's how far they can go. And so all of this conversation, while it can feel like, maybe 10, 15 minutes, will create the container for people to maybe trust a bit more themselves as well as others, as the group generically negotiates and agrees to these. Now, you may want to then invite what others you want to add to this, anything you want to push back on. have a chart pad ready for them to write up in their words what they want. And then if someone adds something, what do y'all think about this? So we're negotiating all of the conversation. Now, a couple of you may want to add, if your gut says this is not feeling like a brave space, to say, please let us know if you're about to say something that feels risky for you, or you're like, I'm being brave right now, let us know. And that will cue us up to pay more attention and really listen deeply and maybe ask some questions, relate in before we then maybe share our perspective. And another one, this is not my work. Somebody else told me this, so I don't know the origins of this. But I might say, this isn't a place you got to be perfect. It's a place to just be present, show up, speak your experience, your truth, and know that it's not going to be perfect. You're not going to say the right thing, have it all packaged up. In fact, if you do, you might miss the moment, or it may not feel authentic. It may feel like you're performing. And so here's what you could do is say, this is a first draft or a rough draft. And then say, I've never really said this before. I could be wrong. It's a new thought. And put it out. I've never shared this story before. And then I think all of us will have a lot more empathy and room and appreciation of your willingness to take a risk. And then you can always come back and say, okay, I've thought about that. This is a second draft. And just give us a second version and see, and say, what do y'all think? And then we can engage it. So those are great modeling for anyone. We don't have to be perfect. We can lean in, take a risk, be brave. Now, as people are doing this, I always say, what do y'all think? Anybody disagree? And so I'm inviting the disagreement until people discuss it, get to push back, do a what if, a yeah, but. You're inviting the resistance. Until you do that, and I'm looking around, I'm panning to see people's energy and what do y'all think of this? I might do a thumbs up if culturally that works in that climate. Or how about people just kind of wave if you're okay with this, or shake your head if you're not quite ready on this one. Say the unsaid. What else do you want to say? Any and all of that is building a deeper container that people may take risks in. They're seeing how you're facilitating multiple perspectives, that all voices get considered, that you can disagree and be given time to explain and considered, and have people maybe have a different opinion, but then we don't die. We can have conflict and move on until we have consensus. So all the dilemmas, the adds, the pushback, and then you finally say, is this close enough? Again, I'm not doing that kind of dominant white culture. We have to agree on everything exactly. It is this close enough for now, knowing that we can talk about it. Again, after lunch, we can check in at any time. People can say, can we look back at the learning agreements so that we all make sure we're working within them? And then I'll look around, is this close enough? Do you all agree today to work to your best ability to work within these? And I'm looking around, I say, you can shake your head, thumbs up, give me a nod. All right. Whew. And then, of course, we're doing this. This is usually the slide is where we're doing it, but I'll have the other slide up. What will help you engage, easiest stretch, and you want to add. And then before you move on, I would do this last one. What can you do if you feel triggered in the session? Again, we already talked about what a hot button trigger is, and if you haven't, you can say it again. And then see what they say. By then, they may be warmed up enough, so enough folks will go, just take a deep breath, take a moment to yourself, hit the restroom and just go for a short walk, ask someone to go with you if you need to, if you want someone to debrief with, name it in the moment. Because then I'll say, yep, if you name it, I will stop what I'm doing. If you say I'm feeling a little some kind of way, I'm feeling triggered, I got something we need to slow down and talk about, give me the T sign, timeout sign. And if you notice someone's doing it and I've missed it, say, Kathy, somebody's asking for a trigger timeout, and we'll slow down and talk about it. And another one for me is just a doodle. Just take a moment. You may want to journal about it, whatever you're feeling, to see what's really going on inside, what's going on deeper, or you might just want to doodle as a way to be present. Whatever works. At this point, you've created more of a container for honesty, authenticity, bravery. And then as you go through your activities, there are a few others I just want to highlight. Clearly, every time you introduce an activity, you can model the depth of authenticity you hope for, and then maybe one or two deeper levels. If you go 5 or 6 levels, people may scare themselves. And so if you end up doing it unconscious, you may say, whew, I went a little deeper than I'm expecting you all to do. So here's kind of what I'm hoping you'll talk about. And then you may want to model one or two deeper. And even as you've asked them to name if it's something new or they're feeling some kind of way, you can model, ooh, that was a new story, a new thought. I had more emotions as I told it than I realized. And I realized I wasn't as clear as I wanted to be. I have a few other thoughts I want to add. So you can model that you can be vulnerable, authentic, and not have it all together. And you can also model by panning yourself. I'm feeling nervous putting this out. I feel a little awkward sharing this in front of some people. What I usually end up doing is, because I try to center race very frequently as a white person, and so I might say, I'm going to tell a story, but I'm feeling awkward because we got folks across all racial identities here and to show some of my racist attitudes. So I'll tell them why I'm feeling nervous or awkward, and then I'll tell the story and who relates and anybody connected with my emotions or my body sensations. Or after I've told a story, I'll just say, ooh, my stomach is feeling a little bit in a knot right now, even if I share that. So you can model some of the panning around emotions, body sensations you're looking for. And then again, throughout the day, 2-hour workshop, you can ask them to pan. If you notice your gut says, ooh, we just hit something, you ask them to breathe, go inside their bodies, notice how they're feeling. And after that comment, especially if it's your comment, or after this conversation, what are you noticing in your body? What feelings are you having? And what's under that or what's behind that? They may help them give voice to what they're feeling. Now, before some activities, I'll tell them this could be an opportunity to choose bravery. The gallery activity where they're writing an example, I can say this could be an example of a microaggression that happened to you. You don't put in that it did, but if you've never really told it before, you haven't shared it to many people, it could be a time you choose bravery and help us all learn the kind of daily indignities that happen. After debriefing gallery would be another place you can say, I'm going to ask you in your small group now to just share how you're feeling and why. That could be a place you choose to be even more authentic than you have before. So you're just kind of setting people up to know this could be a place they could choose authenticity, bravery a bit more. If you know there's an activity that's coming up like that, that's next, you may say, we're about to do an activity. I want to give you some time to reflect and journal, to get in touch with your thoughts, your feelings, and to choose if you maybe want to be a little braver and authentic in this moment. So give them some time. You may want to say, think about all that you've wanted to say but haven't. Maybe this will be a time to write it down. You might choose to say it. Or there's something that's unsaid. Either you haven't said it or you get a feeling, the room, there's something that's unsaid. This could be a time you could write it down, and then I'm going to give you a dyad before we talk in the large group, and you can choose to share or not. And then when you feel something just happened in the room, someone either let you know this was brave for them, or your gut was like, ooh, this was a little deeper than other people have gone so far, or you tell by their nonverbals or their voice, you can just acknowledge it, say, thank you for sharing. It was powerful for me to hear. My gut says that was risky for you. How brave were you just now? And they'll probably go, oh yeah, I was really brave. And then do something. It could be, well, the impact of you sharing was, so use yourself as instrument. If you have a sense the group may not be ready, or you can say, I'd love several people to share. What was the impact of what you just heard? Or ask them to relate in. Who else relates? Who has a similar experience? And you can say, raise your hand if you felt something similar ever. And that's like half the room. So you can do that to get the room, depending upon if the container's feeling a little shaky. And a lot of people, so does anybody want to also tell a story and relate in? And you might say, because when someone shares that honestly and openly, as a way to just thank them for their gift, if you can acknowledge and affirm that you relate with another story, it may help them see something deeper, and it just builds a connection. So you can let them know why. Get a couple stories, then you can ask the whole group, what's the impact on you? How are you feeling? You've now heard all these different folks started by so-and-so. And then just see, this kind of a moment can get the whole group to go deeper, be much more authentic. And you can always do another angle, just what do you appreciate about what that person just shared? Because if they're the only one that had that experience, and what are you learning? What's the impact? What you can appreciate? Any and all of that can get more folks willing to share. Now, sometimes I get lots of intuitive insights. And sometimes someone's talking and I'm thinking, there's something else they want to share. So I might say, I could be wrong, but I have a hunch that there's something else you're not saying. Or I have a hunch there's another story in there. Or I could be wrong, but as you were talking, the story I made up was in the work environment X. Now, because I've owned it as a hunch, a story, I could be wrong, they have every opportunity to say, yeah, no. But even in the asking, it shows that I'm listening and I'm engaged. And so they may say, not so much, but this. Or they're like, yeah, no, and they're done. So then I really honor if people appear or say, no, that's all. Then I'll just back off. And one final way that sometimes, if I have a sense there's more in the room, that people are wanting and willing to share, just not quite ready, and I get a hit, my intuitive guides say, tell this story. And I'm like, I don't know why. So I might even say, I don't know why I'm telling this story, but I just had a sense to tell it. And I'll give a personal example that's a little deeper, more vulnerable, and then just say, anybody relate? Anybody have a similar story? So again, you're using yourself as instrument to get something in the room for people to react to, find connection with, or you might even say, you might have a different angle on this or have a whole different perspective, but anybody want to come in after I just shared my story? Take a deep breath. There are many more ways also to encourage, get more people feel like they can be brave. You can intentionally create the learning container in Act 1 to set that environment, and then use yourself as instrument throughout, as well as model, and then encourage participants to really get deeper engagement, deeper self-work for themselves and for others, to help us all learn how to create inclusive, equitable, socially just organizations in everything we do. Look forward to seeing you next video.